Hey guys, Nick here. Thanks for coming by. This is the part three and the last part of what my life was like before my diagnosis. I'm looking forward to this video, but I'm also a little bit apprehensive and nervous about it. I'm not sure how long it's going to be. It's going to be longer than my others because this covers a lot of stuff that's really kind of hard to talk about for me, and but I feel like it's important. I've done a lot of thinking about what I want to say and kind of what I want to delve into because this is for the world, and it's not fun to talk about and admit some things about yourself, but I hope that this video is going to help at least one other person. Just kind of let you know where I came from, and just kind of remind you that there is hope. I mean, that you can always turn things around, and I'm kind of trying to live that example. So. One of the things that I forgot to mention in my other videos is that I was a regular cigarette smoker and tobacco user for years, even from college or from high school, end of high school really, and going through my adult life up until my diagnosis. So, and forgive me because this is the first video I've actually put notes in for myself to remind myself of things to say. So. I started having kind of some issues, not traumatic issues, but wondering who I was. And I was an adopted child. I was adopted when I was very young, just a couple of months old, and I was always raised, as we said, kind of in a very religious environment, and my parents and I kind of differed philosophically as far as what our kind of beliefs systems were. So that did kind of create some tension, but I just wanted to give kind of that background. So when everything really started getting serious, I was really drinking every single day by this point. I was, sometimes drinking in the morning, but definitely around lunchtime, and, when I would get home, the weekends, it was all about alcohol. I was working full-time, and I was still in a very professional environment during that time, and I was able to somehow balance and maintain, the job. I worked for a great company that I had, developed a good reputation for, and but my drinking was just kind of always part of me, but it hadn't caused any major issues yet. So my divorce was finalized in 2013, and that's when I started dating Carrie. Now, I was an alcoholic before that. It was just kind of who I was, but it wasn't really impacting my personal life. So I started dating Carrie, and it was a lot of fun during that time. Both of us were enjoying each other, and we didn't really know that what was going to end up coming out of it would. We're still together to this day, and we're very, very happy. But I attended my first inpatient rehab in 2016 for alcohol abuse, and I went through the 1 week detox period, which they help you medically get through the detox. You're on medications, so you make sure that you don't have any seizures, make sure that you're not sick. It's not really a fun process, but it's much easier when you're in that safe, controlled environment. So I was there 24/7, and I did the initial detox, but I had to return back to work because I had only spent a week in detox, because that's what I had taken for PTO for vacation time is essentially what I did it for. But after I detoxed from rehab, I attended their what they call an IOP program, which is intensive outpatient. So that was 3 days a week, from 6 p.m. until 9 p.m. at night. I would go there. They would do regular drug screens and alcohol screens on me, and you had work and things like that that you had to do in addition to just attending. So I did that for about 6 months, and I stopped at the end of the year. I hadn't completed the program yet, but my insurance was resetting. So I really didn't want to pay for any more stuff out of pocket because I would be starting a new deductible, a new max, all that stuff. So I left that program after 6 months. I still had another month to go, but I did not complete it. So I was always kind of active. I remained sober, for a few months. I think 9 months or so after that, and I was a real busybody. I was at work, but I was never, a big like workout, type guy. I mean, I had gotten myself in pretty good shape, but I didn't do any like crazy yoga workouts or major weightlifting, or hiking and stuff like that. But I was always kind of moving around, so I was active, but everything was going, pretty well. And, like I said, I was sober for about 9 months. And then in July of 2017, one of the most terrible things that's ever happened to me in my life happened. My mother died very, very suddenly. And I had kind of had a couple of days where I had drank leading up to that. But it was more of a, dinner, a wine thing. I thought I could manage it. So I spoke to my mom 2 days actually before she passed away, and she could hear something different in my voice, and she asked me if I had been drinking, and I told her no. And obviously I had, and my mom was my best friend, and she knew the tone in my voice, and she suddenly died 2 days after that, on July the 7th of 2017. And the last memory that I had, the last conversation, was me lying to my mom. And other than just the trauma of the sudden death, she had had a massive heart attack, and I just started drinking to cope, to whatever you want to call it. I mean, I was just emotionally destroyed. And we attended her funeral at that time, and during that year, which was really the worst year for Carrie and I's life, we buried 8 relatives in that 12-month period. My mother, grandparents, aunts, like really close family members, and then to top it all off, we had to put down our dog. He was old, so there was just all of this just stuff going around. I was drowning it all in alcohol. I didn't know how to cope with all of the death and the loss. And my dad had also just been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. So I didn't know how to manage everything. So I was just working and drinking. I just needed to numb myself. So, I was, a pint and a half of vodka every day at that point. And so I, kept always, just trying to figure out how I was going to deal with life. So I had reached a point in my job where I felt like I had kind of capped. I had kind of maxed out as high in that company that I was going to go, and I made a decision that I wanted to make more money. So I made one of the worst decisions I think I've ever made in my life, and that was leaving that job that I'd been very successful at for 10 years. I had been there, and I went to a job just for the money. And that job was not as it was advertised, to put it lightly. My direct supervisor was just a miserable human being, and she was unbearable to work with. I was trying to learn, but it was kind of a self-teaching type job. But she had all this knowledge, and if I would try to ask her, try to get some guidance, if she was degrading, and I'm not a wimp when it comes to that stuff. It takes a lot to really get to me, but I just couldn't work with her. The job was constant stress, and the company kind of had a reputation for being a little bit rough on its employees, but I was coming in at a senior management level, and in there I also saw just things that were said behind closed doors that were just not ethical. They weren't respectful of people, and I was drinking all the time with that, and I was stressed out of all that stuff. So my drinking just kind of increased more. So it was also starting to cause a problem at home. My partner Carrie, she hated how much I drank, but the thing that she hated the most was that I was hiding it from her and that I would lie to her about it. She's not a stupid person by any means. She's exponentially more intelligent than I am, and it was a big betrayal, to her. She knew that I drank, but I was hiding, the amount because, one, I didn't want to get caught. Two, it was embarrassing. So we kind of started, drifting apart during that time. I didn't hide booze in the house because Carrie was too wise for that. Plus, also, I can tend to be a worrier. So if I was going to be away from home and at work or wherever else, I would just be paranoid all day that that she might find something or just whatever else. So I would go to the liquor store every day and buy kind of what I would have for that day, and I would put it in other bottles and just kind of stuff like that, or I would always have it on my person. I would wear cargo pants a lot, and you could easily hide a pint bottle in there, and so if it was on me, I didn't worry about it, as crazy as that sounds. But sometimes when it would get colder, I would hide it in my vehicle in little side compartments that weren't as noticeable. The car was always locked, and I had the only key to it. I would always leave it on my person, in my pocket or in my keychain, so nobody could go in and look and try to search through my car. By this point, I left that job after 6 months because I couldn't handle it, and my Carrie, knew that it was just an awful job. It was in a different industry, so I left, and I went back to work in the industry that I had trained for and had been in for 10 years after college. So by this point, my drinking had gotten to the point where I would be in withdrawals by the end of the day. I would obviously drink in the morning, and at lunch I would go off and I would get a couple of little airplane bottles at a nearby liquor store, and drink those, at lunch just to kind of get through the day. But I would leave work right at 5 or 5:30, maybe 6 o'clock, and oftentimes I would have to go into another parking lot somewhere else, and I would actually vomit from withdrawals. I didn't keep alcohol in my car for right after I got off work because during that time it was spring and summer. It was hot months. Even fall around here gets pretty hot. So the liquor that I would have had in my car would have just been steaming hot, and there was no way that I would be able to keep it down. So it really became like just a race, to get home, and or get my booze and get home, because around this time, Carrie had also gotten a breathalyzer that I would use as I was getting home. Now, I was able to beat the breathalyzer because I had everything timed out. I knew exactly how long it would take for it to get through my system, for me to blow a zero point 0 to prove to her that I hadn't been drinking, which is why I was in withdrawals. So I was just trying so hard, just to kind of make it through that. And then I would get home, take a shower, and that was where I did most of my drinking at home. When people were home, was in the bathroom. I would be in there for an hour or so, taking a shower, shaving, doing whatever, but just pounding back booze when I was in there. And I would drink a pint usually within that hour. So that obviously was causing problems. Her son was still living at home during that time, and I would leave per her request, for a week, usually a week, a month. I would be in a hotel, and Carrie was under the impression that I was going to the hotel because I didn't want her to see me going through withdrawals, and that I would be sobering up during that time, and I would come back home, clear-headed and whatnot, and ready to start back over. But it was really just the direct opposite. I used that time, since I was unsupervised, to just basically drink myself to oblivion. The big gallon handles of booze, I would, get a couple of those, for the week, and just basically be in the hotel room and work and drink, and even more drinking. So it was just a nightmare. So I spoke to my human resources department. Now, I had only been at this job for about 4 or 5 months, give or take. And I worked out a deal with HR because I wanted to go back into rehab. And HR allowed me to borrow some PTO, some paid time off, to go into rehab for a month. So I went into rehab. This time it was for my second time. They allowed me to come back to work without prejudice. It was really, really great for them to do that. And I was on track, for about 7 months. I was sober, wasn't drinking, everything was, really going well. And then I can't explain what it exactly was that triggered me to start drinking. And I don't really think that I needed a reason to start drinking. I don't think that it was anything particular. I just had that disease of alcoholism. So when I started drinking, I kind of picked right back up where I had left off. And within 4 or 5 months, I was back doing the hotel stays for a week, but this time they were getting longer. It'd be 2 weeks that I would be away, and just drinking myself more and more into oblivion. So I reported to work that day, and I came in drunk after a 3-day bender. And I was talking to my director and actually stumbled and fell in her office. And I was pulled into a side office and confronted by my director, the vice president of operations, and the representative from HR. So I advised them what was going on, and I went back into rehab for the 3rd time. This time it was very different because I was continuing to drink, knowing that I was about to go into rehab. So I actually learned something brand new on that day. You can be too intoxicated to be checked into rehab. They wouldn't take responsibility for me in the condition that I was in. I was taken to the hospital via ambulance from the rehab, and according to my blood alcohol chart, my blood alcohol test that they performed, I was at a 0.46, and that sounds insane. And for those of you that don't know, the legal limit is 0.08. By the time you get to 0.35, you're supposed to technically be in a coma. And so I was 6 times over the legal limit, but I had developed such a tolerance to alcohol that, and I was so dependent on it just to be able to function, that in the hospital I was wide awake having coherent conversations with the doctors and the nurses. I know this because, at that time my dad was there, and this was actually noted in my charts at the hospital. So I was in the hospital for about 8 hours and sobered up a little bit and was able to get admitted into rehab, this time for the 3rd time. After I was admitted, I had completed detox, and it was about my 9th or 10th day when I got a note advising me to contact my job, that HR wanted to speak with me. It was at that time that I was informed in rehab that I was fired from my job. I knew that it was coming, but that was both a blessing and a curse, because I was in a place where I was in a safe environment, and I was in a place where I could talk about what had just happened. But it was always also, it sucked, because that's, in rehab is not really the place that you want to get informed over the phone that you've been fired. I was also deemed that I was not eligible for rehire. And in the industry that I was in and that I had worked so hard for, I was essentially blacklisted, meaning that I can no longer, I'm no longer eligible for a job in that specific field. So that was really, really damaging, because at that point I felt like I had just flushed everything, away. My school, my relationship was still, on the rocks, and I was just lost, and this gets me really emotional, because I was not only a disappointment to myself, but I was a disappointment to everyone around me, and I was very caught up in what my reputation was, because I had a very good reputation in my industry and my community. Now I was, just, seen as some drunk who had gotten fired from his job, and swept under the rug, and everybody moved on. So I was so defeated by this point. So I had gotten into rehab, and I was sober for about 7 months and started drinking again. I don't know why, but again, it's just, it's part of the disease of alcoholism. It's awful. And so at this point, I was so defeated that I had given in to the fact that alcohol was just always going to be a part of my life, and whatever happened, happened. I was in denial that all the things that were happening bad in my life were because of alcohol. Aside from my job, I just thought everybody else was against me. I was like, I'm not hurting anybody, why is it such a big deal? But I was hurting people. I was severing relationships. I was breaking relationships. I was losing, trust. I had lost trust in everybody, and lost their respect. So this started the hotel stay process again, all over again. And you would have thought that I would have learned my lesson. You would have thought that Carrie would have just given up on me, and she was so close. We were almost done. At that point, it's like she said that she knew that the real me was in there somewhere, but I had been so defeated and was just so angry and you know, sad and loathsome. I hate looking in the mirror, and so I have no idea still why she didn't give up on me completely, but um, so her family had conversations with her, saying that they were losing respect for her for tolerating all of my stuff and me dragging her down the way that I had, and I she was pretty much done at that point. So I started the process of finding where I was going to live, where I was going to move out. I had gone back to the hospitality environment, and I was actually in management training. I won't say the name of the establishment, but I was working, there, and that was kind of going to be my career path. I had, it was being intoxicated at work, as long as you weren't injuring people, or at risk of anyone, was kind of overlooked in that environment. For anybody that's worked in that kind of field, you kind of know what I'm talking about. So I was in the process of finding a place to move out, and I was suicidal at that point. And on the outside, when I was at my job, when I would be talking to guests or other employees, I was always in a good mood, and I was happy. I'm very engaging when I talk to people anyway. It's just something that I enjoy. But I was drinking 24/7 without a break now. I mean, there wasn't even worth stopping when I was at work. I was just constantly, always drinking, whether it be, sneaking into the freezer or whatnot. I always had booze on me. I was never stealing from work. I didn't want anything that they had at work. I was, by my own. So, I had gone from when it came to drinking, I had gone from the like to the want to the need to the have to. And that was just a terrible place to be, because I had to drink, to get my body to be able to function without shaking or vomiting. And I started having some major gut issues. I was passing blood, just a lot of different things. And I was drinking a minimum of a liter of vodka every day, and it wouldn't be anything out of the ordinary for me to exceed that. And it was just a terrible existence. And that's when, after 3 years of that, on November 8th, 2021, everything collapsed. That's when my eyes had been yellow for a couple of days, and I woke up in a different world. I was hallucinating. I had done so much damage to my liver that it could no longer repair itself. My kidneys were shutting down. I was in full renal failure, and this is where my first video, my diagnosis story video, picks up. It was horrible, and I'm surprised I made it through talking about a lot of this without kind of breaking down, because that's what alcohol had destroyed me. It had taken everything from me, and I was told that I would I wouldn't live to see New Year's Day, or certainly wouldn't live past New Year's Day. So there was a brief period where I was out of the hospital for about 3 or 4 days, and Carrie and I went to my attorney's office to draft up and make my will and medical directives and power of attorney, medical and financial, and all that. And normally, when that's done, they will draft it up, and then they'll call you back, and you'll go over it, maybe revise a few things, and it's a little bit of a process. For me, it was so urgent that my attorney called me back within 2 hours of me leaving his office, and he had dropped everything and had it drafted up and requested that I come back with Carrie that day and sign it, because he was afraid that if I didn't do it that day, that there was a real chance that I wasn't going to make it through the weekend without going back into critical care or dying. So we rushed back and got my will and all that stuff sealed up, and sure enough, I went back into critical care a few days before Christmas, and spent Christmas and all that in the hospital. I was discharged right after New Year's to go home, and I was sent home on hospice care to be more comfortable. And I think that you guys know what I mean when I say that. I was being sent home to die because a transplant for my liver was not possible at that time. I wouldn't have survived the anesthetic. I wouldn't have been able to. I would have died on the operating table, possibly, just a few minutes after being, not knocked out. So that wasn't an option. So that is where this is where my other videos kind of start to pick up. I will probably do a what my life is like now part, but I'm not 100% sure. That's kind of what all my other videos are kind of about, but I think I may do it in the future just to kind of put a bow on that part of my story. So thanks everybody for listening. I hope that this is helpful to at least one other person out there. Like I said, I was really nervous and apprehensive as to whether or not I was going to talk about this and how I was going to do it. But I love all of you all, and thank you for listening. As always, in the description below, there is a link to my Facebook group for end-stage liver disease and cirrhosis support. I know a lot of you guys have joined the group, and I am so happy. I hope you guys are finding it helpful. I hope everybody has a great week, and as always, have a safe and wonderful day. Thanks.